Okay, we'll start with this. Lamont Roach feels disrespected by Gervonta Davis. Weird that he avoided the rematch. Lamont Roach appreciated Gervonta Davis for giving an opportunity Davis didn't need to grant him before they fought March 1st. He only gave him that opportunity because he thought it was going to be easy. As soon as he realized it wasn't, you saw what he did. 7 months later, Roach feels disrespected by Davis because the WBA lightweight champion reneged on agreeing to a fight with him again. Davis exercised his contractual right to an immediate rematch following their controversial majority draw, but postponed their second fight twice before ultimately announcing that he'll instead face Jake Paul in a cruiserweight exhibition November 14th at Kaseya Center in Miami. That has to be the second or third time now I've seen a periodical refer to the fight as an exhibition. What do they know that we don't? And remember that Calvin Ford himself, Gervonta Davis's longtime trainer, also referred to it as an exhibition. What do they know that we don't? Once Davis definitely bailed on their rematch, Roach, the WBA super featherweight champion, agreed to move up another 5 pounds to face WBC interim champion Isaac Cruz in a PBC pay-per-view main event December 6th at the Frost Bank Center in San Antonio. Roach addressed what he considers bizarre behavior by Davis during the newest episode of Inside the Ring, available on DAZN and Ring's YouTube channel. There's nothing bizarre about it, like I said. He only fought Lamont because he thought it was going to be easy, and as soon as he realized that it wasn't, he bailed. He didn't want to go through that again. For real, I feel a little disrespected, like just on the business aspect, Roach told co-hosts Max Kellerman and Mike Coppinger, just because you don't do business like that. Now, if I say I were to go into arbitration, then what? Then you gotta pay lawyer fees, or put your promotional company in the hole, where they have to back you because technically it's on them. They're the ones who's putting on the fight. That's who I have a contract with. That's who draws up the agreement for the contractor, whatever the case may be. Like, it's crazy for you to do that business-wise, personally, and for the integrity of the sport. It's just like, now you're playing with the sport. Like, come on, bro. I think that's just a little weird. I think the reason that Lamont Roach is now headlining a PBC pay-per-view is as sort of a booby prize, that the people at the PBC did not secure him the rematch that he agreed to, so instead, they get him another guy. Except you're not going to make with Isaac Cruz at 140 what you would have made in the rematch with Gervonta Davis. I have no doubts that the second fight between them would have likely sold more than the first because of the controversy in the first, like what we saw with Wilder and Fury, which also ended in a draw. The second fight sold more than the first one. Roach assumed Gervonta would want an opportunity to redeem himself following a 12-round draw, 135-pound title fight. Roach and legions of fans believe that he won at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Judge Eric Marlinsky scored Davis a 115-113 winner, but Glenn Feldman and Steve Weisfeld had it 114-114 apiece. Baltimore's Davis escaped with a draw, in large part because referee Steve Willis didn't count a knockdown for Roach when Davis oddly took a knee 43 seconds into the ninth. Davis, who claimed a substance placed in his hair got in his eye, immediately went to his corner and had trainer Calvin Ford wipe off his face after taking a knee, which could have resulted in a DQ. And by all rights it should have. They bent the rules more than once that same night. Their rematch was initially planned for June 21st in Las Vegas and later for August 16th, which speaks to what I've been saying the whole time, that this was not an either-or situation to where either you fight Lamont or you fight Jake. You could have fought them both. So why didn't he? Because he wasn't sure he could get it done in a rematch. He didn't think he could beat Lamont Roach. The hard-hitting Davis was a 16-1 favorite before Roach tested him. Now, much of the public perceives Davis as a fighter far too content to avoid their rematch. Roach of Upper Marlboro, Maryland, has been told as much countless times throughout their home state. All you're gonna hear is, "Why is that man ducking you?" Roach said of his interactions with fans. I mean, and trust me, I've been to Baltimore. I had a lunch or two in Baltimore. I hear the same thing every time, like, "Oh, big fan, but why is that man ducking you?" That's all I hear. I try to let it go, but it's hard to let it go because that's what everybody talks about. That's all, and that's crazy. If he loses to Isaac Cruz,
forget it.
what the narrative will then become is that because Lamont lost to a common opponent between him and Gervonta, it's like Gervonta beat him. Gervonta beat Isaac if Isaac beats Lamont. Oh, well, that's like if Gervonta beat him. That's what they did with Devin Haney the night that he lost to Ryan Garcia. That's what the Gervonta Davis fans said. Gervonta beat Ryan, and Ryan beat Devin, so it's like Gervonta beat Devin. Except that triangle theories don't work, and styles make fights. But that's the out that they will give Gervonta Davis if Lamont Roach falters. They're not doing Lamont any real favors by putting him in there with Isaac Cruz, who's already had 4 fights at 140, and this will be his 5th, where Lamont is a debutante at that weight.
And he's not a hard puncher. He was not a hard puncher at 130 or 135. He's not going to be one now at 140. He only has 10 recorded knockouts.
I would love for Lamont Roach to come through this with the W, but I think the people at the PBC have every intention of screwing him over. That by hook or by crook, Isaac might win this thing on activity and aggression alone. And that's if he doesn't stop Lamont, keeping everything within that protective PBC biosphere. See, it would be a lot worse if Lamont fought a Shakur Stevenson or a Teofimo Lopez, and one of them beat him.
Because then that would make Gervonta look bad for having not beaten him, for struggling so much with that same guy. But if one of Gervonta's old opponents beats Lamont, somebody that he beat already, well, it's not as bad.
It's all about run and spin and saving face at this point.
Lamont Roach is a goddamn fool for taking this fight. He could have parlayed that draw with Gervonta into an arrangement with Matchroom or an engagement with Turkey that likely would have paid him a lot more than what he's about to make boxing Isaac on pay-per-view, as I don't anticipate very many people are gonna buy that fight.
Stupid is as stupid does, and accepting that fight at the PBC was damn stupid. And just in keeping with the theme of all things PBC, reports are now coming out that David Benavidez is set to leave the PBC as his fight contract with Samson Lewkowicz and Al Haymon is almost finished, and he wants to promote himself going forward per Fight Hub TV.
I don't really let other fights kind of get into my brain. I'm getting ready for Anthony Yarde. I'm 100% focused on Anthony Yarde, and whatever comes next, comes next. But as for what I'm thinking of, that's what else is there left? What other fights you guys want to see me fight? Especially that we're here with Turkey Al-Sheikh. We're getting these fights done. In my opinion, a fight with Benavidez or Bivol is next. And doesn't know, if I was a different type of fighter, I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to go talk to my team and see what's the best. No, the fights I want are Benavidez and Bivol.
It would certainly accent David Benavidez's newfound commitment to having those 2 fights in that succession if he ditched Al Haymon and the PBC, as they contribute nothing to either of those situations.
Contribute nothing to those fights. If David Benavidez were to keep those guys around, all that would be is more hands in a cookie jar, more guys taking a slice out of his purse. When they ain't the ones paying him, they ain't the ones paying for the fight, they ain't the ones paying for the opponent. I feel like the smartest thing he can do at this point is stick to his word and ditch the dead weight. I said it from the very beginning that upon David Benavidez's ascent to the light heavyweight division, the PBC don't have the bodies for him. They don't have the money.
There's not a lot that they could do for him as a light heavyweight and beyond, since they have no stake in the light heavyweight division, the cruiserweight division. David Benavidez has made, 2 or 3 pay-per-view appearances in what is the dwindling pay-per-view market, where less and less customers are buying pay-per-views. I don't imagine he's made all that much money from the Caleb Plant fight, the Demetrius Andrade fight, the more recent David Morrell fight, because a lot of people people didn't buy those fights. So in all likelihood, all David got was his guarantee.
How many fighters have they reeled in with the promise of a pay-per-view upside when the pay-per-view likely won't have one? So you don't get that mystical, back-end money you're always hearing about if there's no upside.
The PBC and Samson Lewkowicz jointly have outlived their usefulness to David Benavidez, and he stands to make that much more money going into business for himself and doing business independently with Turkey LL Sheik.
That would really uncomplicate things for David, but further complicate things for the PBC, because Gervonta Davis is off to Netflix to box Jake, and he means to retire after that. Meanwhile, David
wants to go into business for himself. And those two guys are the last two remaining flagship fighters the PBC has. The last two guys that are worth anything. Can they stay afloat with just Brandon Figueroa, Mario Barrios,
Sebastian Fundora?
If David Benavidez really does end up ditching the dead weight, that puts the PBC in an even more compromising position. It's not a secret that Turkey LL Sheik has already let it be known he wants to do a show in the first quarter of next year, in February, and he wants David Benavidez to be there, presumably against Artur Beterbiev, who David Benavidez mentioned. This is David's opportunity to become the face of boxing. Irrespective of whether or not you think he can or he can't, that's what this represents. His opportunity to become that, independent of Canelo Alvarez. And it's what I've been saying the whole time. You shouldn't have so much of your career riding on one fight with one guy that you may or may not get, because that's the mistake that Demetrius Andrade made for years.
Seems that David Benavidez finally woke up and smelt the mediocrity, realized you gotta get out there and you have to carve out your own lane, create your own legacy. If that means fighting Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol, if that means fighting Zurdo Ramirez.
But, you know what I mean, sometimes in the business sense, things happen, you know, so sometimes things are tricky, you know what I mean, and it's a little bit more difficult than just making the fight happen. But like I said, I'm pushing to make the biggest and best fights happen, and if we can't get that, then my plan is to get a fight with Zurdo Ramirez at cruiserweight. It's just like, you know what I mean, I've been calling for these big fights, you know.
Me gustaría también enfrentarme a Benavidez, ya que él también quiere subir de división. Estamos en pláticas también si podemos hacer esa pelea en mayo. Yo creo que pues sería una pelea muy interesante. La gente quiere ver ese tipo de peleas y pues nosotros, de hecho lo conozco muy bien, hemos entrenado bastante tiempo, somos amigos, pero pues arriba del ring hay que dar todo, sí. No hay amistad.
Así que con Benavidez también, eso no me justo te iba a preguntar
también.
eso.
Creo que es muy viable, yo creo que se puede hacer en mayo, en septiembre, en las fechas mexicanas. Y pues yo encantado de tener esa contienda y darle pues el buen espectáculo a la gente.
Zurdo Ramirez has not escaped the crosshairs of David Benavidez, and the same is true in reverse. For those that don't speak Spanish like the rest of us, what Zurdo Ramirez indicated is that talks are ongoing. Pláticas.
Zurdo wants to do the fight in either May or September of the coming year for obvious reasons, those particular dates.
So we talked about all the Turkey shit, you know, the Beterbiev fight, the Bivol fight. What about a Zurdo Ramirez fight, and what would that entail? I hardly think that Oscar De La Hoya would allow David Benavidez access to that fighter without some kind of a commitment. Zurdo Ramirez, I believe, is the only male champion under the Golden Boy Promotions banner.
Floyd Schofield is in line to become WBA lightweight champion, but he's not there yet.
As stated, Golden Boy don't got that many belts over there. They don't got that many champions. So I don't think Oscar would allow David access to that fighter without some kind of a commitment. Not dissimilar from what he told Shakur Stevenson in the build-up of the William Zepeda fight. Do you remember? He told him that unless Shakur Stevenson signs to Golden Boy Promotions, that fight won't happen. And the only reason that it did is because Turkey LL Sheik stepped in. Turkey LL Sheik paid through the nose to make that fight a reality. That's the only reason that we got it. But if Oscar would have had it his way,
he would have held it to ransom. So who's to say that he won't do the exact same thing with David Benavidez, who seems to be going into free agency moving forward? He would be theoretically free to sign a deal with Golden Boy. Golden Boy could use him.
I've had my criticisms of Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions in the past, and I still do, but I happen to think that Golden Boy would be a good fit for David Benavidez moving forward. Oscar De La Hoya has always had the inside track on the Mexican-American fans. The fans that David Benavidez is trying to endear himself to, appeal to. That could be a decent relationship between him and Oscar. What they have in common, they both hate Canelo Alvarez's guts.
They both like to treat their nose. They both like that booger sugar.
They like to party.
What is the advantage for David Benavidez signing to Golden Boy Promotions? Well, obviously, he would then be given access to that Zurdo Ramirez fight, but moreover, Golden Boy could give him his fill of no-hopers and tune-ups and stay-busy fights for decent money. Not as much as he would make boxing at Riyadh Season or Ring Magazine cards for Turkey LL Sheik. Not as much. Not as much money, but not as risky either. Turkey's willing to pay these guys. He's willing to pay them through the nose, but it's not for stay-busy fights, and it's not for tune-ups. So it all depends on what does David Benavidez really want? Does he want to make a statement? Does he want to make history? Or does he want to stay busy?
Just stay busy and make money where he can. The Zurdo Ramirez fight is a good fight in and of itself, and it would be a good achievement for David if he could move up to cruiser and win those 2 alphabet titles. Though beyond that, the air gets kind of thin up there at cruiserweight, because if you do win those 2 alphabet titles from Zurdo Ramirez, you know who's going to come a-knocking after that? Jai Opataya. You win 2 belts at cruiserweight, that puts you in his crosshairs, and you have to wonder if that's what David Benavidez really wants. It's becoming more and more apparent that that's not what Zurdo Ramirez wants. Zurdo Ramirez was reported to have had shoulder surgery earlier this year, and he's sitting out the rest of it, set to return at some point in the coming calendar year. Meanwhile, Jai Opataya is set to defend his title before this year is out.
I think that Zurdo's shoulder surgery, it happened at a very convenient time, because if not for that, he would have been free to unify titles with Jai Opataya.
Jai Opataya wouldn't have been on the hook to satisfy another mandatory if there were a unification match available. The reason it isn't is because Zurdo had shoulder surgery.
Oh.
So that when he resurfaces and he is recovering, or so they say, what is he talking about? Is he talking about unifying titles with Jai Opataya? No, he's talking about fighting David Benavidez. Is that a coincidence?
I've long maintained that I don't think Oscar De La Hoya wants that fight for Zurdo, and I don't know how much Zurdo wants that fight for himself. He might look at David as a safer option, a guy who would be moving up in weight, is new to the division,
a fight that would not require him to travel to Saudi Arabia to deal with Turkey LL Sheik. They might look at David as a more attractive option. David might oblige them. How bad does David really want Artur Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol?
I think we're going to get that answer shortly.